The stagecoach driver hadn't even apologized. "End of the line, miss," he'd grunted, hauling her trunk and carpet bag onto the dirt with all the ceremony of dumping trash. Cutter's Junction, or what's left of it. Evelyn had stepped down onto the platform, if you could call 3 weathered planks a platform, and looked around at what was supposed to be her destination. A single building slouched against the prairie wind, its paint peeled down to gray wood, its windows dark. No lampposts, no people, no town. "Wait!" she'd called after him, her voice thin against the vastness. "Where's the town? Where's the school?" The driver had already climbed back onto his bench. "Town's 8 miles northeast. You'll want to arrange transport." "With whom?" He'd shrugged. "Somebody'll come through, eventually." Then he'd snapped the reins, and the stagecoach had lurched away, wheels grinding over the hard-packed earth, leaving her in a cloud of dust that settled slowly, like the final punctuation on her mistake. That had been 4 hours ago. Now the sun was a bleeding wound on the horizon, and Evelyn sat on her trunk with her coat pulled tight, watching the light die. She'd tried the building, locked and abandoned, smelling of old tobacco and mouse droppings. She'd walked 100 yards in each direction, scanning for signs of civilization. Nothing. Just prairie stretching endlessly and wind that cut through her eastern wool like it was tissue paper. Her fingers had gone numb an hour ago. Her feet would follow soon. This is how people die out here, she thought, with a clarity that was almost funny, not dramatically, not fighting Indians or outlaws, just forgotten, left behind. She thought about her mother's face when she'd announced her plans, the pinched disappointment, the theatrical sigh. The frontier, Evelyn? Have you lost your senses? What kind of life is that for a woman of your education? A better one than marrying Roger Whitmore and spending 40 years hosting dinner parties in Cambridge, slowly calcifying into someone she didn't recognize. That's what she hadn't said. Instead, "I've been offered a teaching position. It's a remarkable opportunity." "It's suicide," her mother had replied. "Mark my words, you'll be begging to come home within a month." Evelyn pulled her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. She wouldn't give her mother the satisfaction, even if it killed her. The sky was darkening to purple when she heard them. Wolves, she thought, though she'd never heard a wolf in her life. High, wavering calls that made the hair on her neck stand up. Distant, but not distant enough. She stood, scanning the prairie, seeing nothing but shadows lengthening, swallowing the landscape. She should stay near the building, keep her back to the wall, make herself small. Instead, she found herself standing in the open, case and trunk at her feet, feeling absurdly visible. A figure in a burgundy traveling suit, utterly out of place, like someone had dropped a music box in the middle of an ocean. The cold was becoming serious now, not uncomfortable, dangerous. Her hands were shaking too hard to button her coat properly. Her thoughts were starting to swim, disconnecting. Maybe if I sleep, she thought, just for a little while. Just until someone comes. She knew, dimly, that was wrong. You weren't supposed to sleep when you were this cold. But the exhaustion was immense. 3 days of travel, rough coach rides, bad food, worse sleep, and now this. Her body wanted to shut down. Let someone else handle it. She sat down again, then lay on her side, using her carpet bag as a pillow. The ground was hard and cold, but at least she was out of the wind. The stars were coming out, more than she'd ever seen in Boston. Thousands of them, indifferent and beautiful. "I'm sorry, Mother," she thought. "You were right." Then the darkness took her. Tche. She woke to motion. Not the rattling of a stagecoach. This was smoother, quieter. A gentle rocking, like being on a boat. For a moment, still swimming up from deep sleep, she thought she was home, in her childhood bed, dreaming of traveling west. Then she opened her eyes and saw stars sliding past overhead, and realized she was moving. She jerked upright, or tried to. Her body was wrapped in something heavy and rough. A blanket. Wool, thick and warm. She was lying in the bed of a wagon, her trunk and bag secured beside her, and the wagon was moving steadily through the darkness. Easy. The voice came from ahead, low, male, and calm. She twisted around, heart hammering, and saw a figure on the driver's bench. A man, broad-shouldered, wearing a heavy coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. She couldn't see his face. "Who are you?" Her voice came out ragged. "Where are you taking me?" town, he said, not turning around. Same place you were headed. I didn't. She struggled to sit up fully, the blanket falling away. The cold hit immediately. I didn't ask for help. No. A pause. You were about an hour from freezing to death. The flat certainty of it silenced her. She looked around, trying to orient herself. The prairie was a dark ocean around them, stars reflected in nothing. The wagon creaked steadily forward, pulled by two horses she could barely see. How did you... She stopped, starting over. How did you find me? Wasn't looking for you. His voice was matter-of-fact, no inflection. Ride took me past the way station, saw your things, then saw you. I was just resting. You were dying. Again, that blunt certainty. Evelyn felt anger flash through her, hot and welcome after the cold. You don't know that. I was perfectly fine. Your lips were blue. You weren't shivering anymore. That's the body shutting down. Now he did glance back, and she caught a glimpse of his face. Hard angles, shadowed, a dark beard. You can be angry if you want, but you'd be dead if I'd left you there. She wanted to argue, to reassert some control over a situation that had spun entirely out of her hands. But the words died in her throat because he was right. She knew he was right. The last thing she remembered was lying down, so tired, so cold, thinking just for a minute. Thank you, she said instead, the words stiff but genuine. He nodded once and turned back to the horses. They rode in silence for a while, the wagon creaking, the wind hissing through the grass. Evelyn pulled the blanket back around herself, feeling warmth slowly return to her fingers and toes, painful but necessary. What's your name? She asked finally. Cole Maddox. I'm Evelyn Carter. She waited for some acknowledgement, some pleasantry. When none came, she pushed on. I'm the new school teacher for Cutter's Junction. I know. You know? Town's been expecting you for 2 weeks. He shifted the reins slightly, guiding the horses around some obstacle she couldn't see. Stage must have left you at the old station by mistake. Nobody uses that anymore. The driver said... She stopped, furious again. He said someone would come through eventually. Someone did. There was no judgment in his voice, no emotion at all, which somehow made it worse. Evelyn wrapped the blanket tighter, feeling small and stupid and desperately out of her depth. How far to town? She asked. 2 hours? Maybe 3? He glanced at the sky. We'll get there before dawn. 3 more hours. Evelyn settled back against her trunk, watching the stars. She'd expected her arrival to be different, stepping off the coach in daylight, being met by the school board, perhaps, or the mayor. Somewhere with people and buildings and a sense of order. Not this. Not being rescued half-frozen by a stranger who spoke in sentences of 3 words or less and clearly regarded her as an inconvenience at best. Do you live in town? She asked, unable to bear the silence. Nearby. Are you a rancher? Yes. How long have you been out here? Long enough. It was like trying to have a conversation with a stone. Evelyn bit back frustration, reminding herself that this man had saved her life, that she owed him courtesy if nothing else. But the silence stretched, and her Eastern instincts, the need to fill quiet spaces with words, to establish connection through conversation, pushed back. I'm from Boston, she offered. This is my first time west of the Mississippi. Figured. What gave it away? Everything. Despite herself, Evelyn almost smiled. There was no malice in it, just observation. She supposed she must look absurdly out of place. Her burgundy traveling suit, her carefully pinned hair, her leather gloves, now slightly worse for wear, her complete lack of preparation for what the frontier actually demanded. I suppose I have a lot to learn, she said quietly. Cole didn't answer, but something in his posture shifted slightly. Not quite agreement, but acknowledgement. They rode on, but the town appeared gradually, not all at once. First a few scattered lights in the distance, then shapes resolving into buildings, then the sound of a dog barking somewhere, and finally the rattle of the wagon wheels changing from dirt to harder packed road. Cutter's Junction. Even in the darkness, Evelyn could see it was small. A main street perhaps 300 yards long, buildings on either side, most of them dark at this hour. A general store, a saloon with yellow light spilling from its windows, a church with a white steeple. A few other structures she couldn't identify. At the far end, a larger building that might be a hotel. Cole guided the wagon down the main street, moving slowly. A few faces appeared in windows, curious, then disappeared. The saloon doors swung open briefly, releasing a burst of piano music and voices, then closed again. He stopped in front of a small building near the center of town. Even in the dark, Evelyn could see the peeling paint, the crooked step, the window with a crack running diagonally across it. "Schoolhouse," Cole said, climbing down. "Living quarters in back." Evelyn stared at it. This was her school, her fresh start. It looked like it was one good wind away from collapse. Cole was already lifting her trunk from the wagon bed, carrying it toward the front door, with an ease that suggested it weighed nothing. Evelyn climbed down, legs stiff from the cold and the ride, and followed him with her carpet bag. The door was unlocked. Cole pushed it open, and they stepped into darkness. He struck a match, the small flame revealing a single room with rough wooden floors, a pot-bellied stove in the corner, a few battered desks scattered about, and a teacher's desk at the front that looked like it had survived a war. The walls were bare boards. The ceiling was low. There was a smell of dust and old wood and something else. Mice, probably. "Back here." Cole moved through a doorway at the rear, and Evelyn followed him into an even smaller room. A narrow bed, a washstand, a single chair, a tiny stove. This was where she would live. He set her trunk down and lit a lamp on the washstand, and the room sprang into fuller relief. It was clean, at least. Someone had swept. There were blankets folded on the bed, and a pitcher of water on the washstand. "Town committee set it up for you," Cole said. Best they could. Evelyn stood in the center of the room, looking around, and felt the full weight of her situation settle over her. This was it. This was her new life. Not the adventure she'd imagined, not the noble calling she'd described to her friends in Boston. Just a tiny room in a dying town at the edge of nowhere. "Thank you," she said, because she didn't know what else to say. "For everything, for bringing me here, for saving my life." Cole nodded, already moving toward the door. "Stove's got wood, pumps out back for water. General store opens at 7 if you need supplies." "Wait," she turned. "How much do I owe you? For the transport?" He paused in the doorway, and for the first time she saw something like surprise cross his face. "Nothing. But you don't owe me anything, Miss Carter." He settled his hat lower. "Welcome to Cutter's Junction." Then he was gone, his boots heavy on the wooden floor, the front door opening and closing. A moment later she heard the wagon pulling away. Evelyn stood alone in her new home, in a town she couldn't see, in a life she didn't recognize, and felt tears threaten for the first time since leaving Boston. Not tears of sadness, exactly, just overwhelm. The immensity of what she'd done, the distance she'd traveled, the comfort she'd left behind. But she didn't cry. Instead, she unpacked her nightgown, changed quickly in the cold, and climbed into the narrow bed. The blankets were rough but warm. The mattress was thin, but better than the ground at the way station. As she lay there, exhausted beyond measure, listening to the wind test the windows and the unfamiliar sounds of a frontier town settling into night, she thought about Cole Maddox, the stranger who'd pulled her back from the edge without asking for anything in return. A man of so few words she'd learned almost nothing about him, yet who'd shown her more kindness than anyone in Boston had in years. This is the frontier, she thought. Hard, strange, nothing like home. Then she slept. Morning came brutally early, announced by roosters and the sound of wagon wheels and voices calling to each other in the street. Evelyn woke disoriented, forgetting for a moment where she was, then remembering everything in a rush. She rose, washed her face in cold water from the pitcher, and dressed quickly. Her burgundy traveling suit was dusty and wrinkled, but it would have to do. She pinned her hair carefully, making herself presentable, then stepped out into the schoolroom. In daylight, it looked worse. The desks were scarred and mismatched, some missing legs propped up with blocks of wood. The floor had gaps between the boards wide enough to see the ground beneath. The stove looked functional, but ancient, its pipe disappearing through the ceiling at an angle that seemed structurally questionable. And the books, she'd been told there would be books, were a sad collection of water-damaged primers and outdated texts stacked haphazardly on a shelf that sagged under their weight. Evelyn stood in the center of the room, hands on hips, and made a decision. She wouldn't complain. She wouldn't write home begging for rescue. She would make this work. She spent the morning cleaning, sweeping the floors, wiping down the desks, organizing the books, testing the stove. It was hard work, harder than anything she'd done in Boston, and her hands, soft from a life of teaching in well-appointed private schools, blistered quickly. But there was something satisfying about it, too. Physical progress. Visible improvement. Around noon, the door opened. "Miss Carter?" A woman stood in the doorway, perhaps 40, wearing a practical calico dress and an appraising expression. Behind her, two younger women peered in curiously. "Yes," Evelyn said, setting down her broom. "I'm Evelyn Carter." "Martha Webb, I'm on the school committee." The woman stepped inside, looking around with the air of someone conducting an inspection. "We weren't sure when you'd arrive. Heard Cole Maddox brought you in last night." "He found me at the old way station," Evelyn said carefully. "The stage driver left me there by mistake." Martha's expression didn't change. "Lucky Cole rides that way. Not many do anymore." She gestured to the two younger women. "This is Sarah and Elizabeth. Sarah's husband runs the general store. Elizabeth teaches Sunday school." The two women nodded, friendly but reserved. Evelyn sensed she was being evaluated, her worth as a teacher and as a person, not yet established. "The schoolhouse needs work," Martha said, stating the obvious. "We've had trouble keeping teachers. Last one left after 3 months. One before that made it 6 weeks." "Why?" Evelyn asked. Martha's smile was thin. "Frontier life isn't for everyone, Miss Carter. It's hard, lonely. The children are—" She paused, choosing her word. "Challenging. Farm kids mostly when they can be spared from work. They don't take well to Eastern refinement." There was a challenge in her voice, a skepticism barely concealed. Evelyn felt her spine straighten. "I didn't come here for refinement," she said quietly. "I came here to teach." "We'll see." Martha moved toward the door, the other women following. "School starts Monday, 8 o'clock. Don't expect more than 10 students, and don't expect them to sit still for poetry readings. These children need practical education, reading, writing, arithmetic, things they can use." "I understand." "Do you?" Martha paused in the doorway, looking back. "Because understanding something in theory and living it are very different things. You look like a woman who's had a comfortable life, Miss Carter. Out here, comfort is a luxury most of us can't afford." Then she was gone, leaving Evelyn alone again with her broom in her blistered hands and a growing sense that proving herself here would be harder than any exam she'd ever taken. She spent the afternoon exploring the town, or what there was of it. The general store, where a taciturn man sold her coffee, flour, and candles without much conversation. The post office, a cramped room in the back of a boarding house, run by an elderly woman who looked at Evelyn's Boston return address with undisguised curiosity. The saloon, which she walked past quickly, aware of eyes following her from the doorway. Cutter's Junction wasn't dying exactly, but it wasn't thriving either. The buildings had a worn, makeshift quality, like they'd been built quickly and maintained grudgingly. The people she passed offered nods, but not smiles, polite but distant. She was a stranger here, an outsider, and would remain so until she proved otherwise. By late afternoon, she found herself at the edge of town, looking out at the prairie stretching endlessly away. The landscape was beautiful in its harshness, golden grass moving in waves under the wind, the sky impossibly wide, the horizon a clean line separating earth from heaven. It felt both liberating and terrifying, so much space, so much emptiness. First time seeing it in daylight? She turned, startled. Cole Maddox stood a few yards away, leading his horse by the reins. In the full light of day, she could see him more clearly, tall, perhaps 35, with dark hair and darker eyes, his face weathered by sun and wind. He moved with the easy confidence of someone completely at home in this landscape. "Yes," Evelyn said. "It's different from Boston. I'd imagine." He studied her for a moment, and she had the uncomfortable feeling he could see right through her carefully maintained composure to the uncertainty beneath. "You settling in?" "As much as I can. The schoolhouse needs work." "Most things out here do." He gestured toward the prairie. "You should stay in sight of town. Easy to get turned around out there." "I wasn't planning to wander off." "Good." He started to move past, then paused. "Martha Webb talked to you?" "This morning, she seems—" Evelyn searched for a diplomatic word. "Skeptical." Cole's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "Martha's skeptical of everyone. Don't take it personal. She's had 3 teachers quit on her in 2 years. She's protecting herself." "From what?" "Disappointment." The word hung between them. Evelyn felt its weight, the assumption that she too would fail, that she'd last a few months, maybe less, before running back east with her tail between her legs. "I'm not going to quit," she said. Cole looked at her, really looked at her, his dark eyes searching hers, and she forced herself not to look away. After a moment, he nodded slowly. "Hope not," he said. "Town needs a teacher." Then he swung up onto his horse and rode away, leaving Evelyn standing at the edge of the prairie, watching him disappear into the golden grass. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Evelyn cleaned the schoolhouse from top to bottom, organized supplies, planned lessons, and forced herself to eat even when the loneliness made her stomach tight. She walked the town every day, learning its rhythms, nodding to the same faces, slowly becoming a familiar sight rather than a curiosity. On Sunday, she attended church, a simple service in a building that doubled as a meeting hall, led by a circuit preacher who visited once a month. The congregation was small, maybe 30 people, and Evelyn felt their eyes on her throughout the service. Afterward, a few people introduced themselves. A rancher named Tom Henderson and his wife, a blacksmith called Dutch, a widow named Mrs. Kimball, who ran the boarding house. Martha Webb was there too, with her husband and 3 children. She nodded to Evelyn but didn't approach, maintaining her careful distance. Cole Maddox didn't attend. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. Evelyn woke before dawn dressed in her most practical dress, dark blue, high-necked, serviceable, and started a fire in the schoolhouse stove. She arranged the desks, laid out the books, wrote her name on the board in careful script, Miss Evelyn Carter. Then she waited. 8 o'clock came and went. The street outside remained quiet. Evelyn stood at the window, stomach knotted with anxiety, wondering if anyone would come at all. At 8:15 the door opened. A boy entered, perhaps 10 years old, thin and wary, wearing clothes that had been mended many times. He stopped just inside the doorway, looking at Evelyn with open suspicion. "You the new teacher?" he asked. "I am. What's your name?" "Sam Henderson." He jerked his thumb toward the door. "My ma says I gotta come, but I'm not staying if it's boring." Before Evelyn could respond, more children arrived. A girl of about 8 with braids and a serious expression, 2 younger boys who looked like twins, an older girl carrying a baby on her hip. They filed in slowly, taking seats, staring at Evelyn with a mixture of curiosity and challenge. By 8:30, she had 11 students, ranging in age from 6 to 14. They sat scattered throughout the room, none of them speaking, all of them watching her with the alert wariness of wild animals, uncertain whether to flee or attack. Evelyn stood at the front of the room and made another decision. She wouldn't try to be their friend. She wouldn't patronize them or coddle them. She would be honest. "My name is Miss Carter," she said. "I'm from Boston. This is my first time teaching on the frontier, and I'm sure you all know more about surviving out here than I do. But I know about books. I know about history and mathematics and science and literature, and I'm here to share that knowledge with anyone willing to learn." Silence. Then Sam Henderson spoke up. "What's literature?" "Stories," Evelyn said. "Poems, plays, ways of understanding the world through words." "We got plenty of world right outside," one of the twins said. "Don't need words to understand it." "Maybe," Evelyn agreed. "But words give you power. They let you record things, communicate across distances, preserve knowledge. They let you think more clearly and argue more effectively. And out here, where resources are scarce, knowledge might be the most valuable thing you can have. She saw a flicker of interest in a few faces. Not enthusiasm exactly, but attention. "We'll start with reading," she said. "Then arithmetic. Then we'll talk about what you want to learn." It wasn't perfect. Sam Henderson dozed off during the reading lesson. The twins got into a shoving match during arithmetic. The baby cried, and the older girl had to take him outside. But they stayed. All of them stayed. And when Evelyn dismissed them at 3 o'clock, several of them said, "Goodbye, Miss Carter," without being prompted. It was a start. The days developed a rhythm. Wake before dawn, light the stove, prepare lessons, teach from 8 to 3, clean up, prepare for the next day, collapse into bed exhausted. The children were challenging, restless, skeptical, prone to testing boundaries, but they were also sharp and curious in ways her Boston students had never been. They asked questions Evelyn had never encountered. Why does wheat grow better in certain soil? How do you calculate the angle for a roof that won't collapse under snow? What causes lightning? She didn't always know the answers, but she learned to say, "I don't know, let's find out," and to treat their practical concerns as seriously as any academic question. Slowly, grudgingly, they began to trust her. And slowly, grudgingly, the town began to accept her. Martha Webb stopped by one afternoon, ostensibly to check on supplies, but really to observe. She watched Evelyn teach for 20 minutes, her expression unreadable, then nodded and left without comment. But the next day, she sent over a basket of bread and preserves with her daughter. Tom Henderson, Sam's father, fixed the broken window one Saturday without being asked. When Evelyn tried to pay him, he shook his head. "Teachers shouldn't be teaching through a cracked window. Consider it done." Mrs. Kimball from the boarding house invited Evelyn to dinner, a simple meal, but served with warmth and genuine conversation. Afterward, sitting on the porch watching the sun set, the older woman said quietly, "You're tougher than you look, Miss Carter. I wasn't sure at first, but you've got spine." "Thank you," Evelyn said, surprised by how much the words meant. "Don't thank me yet. Winter's coming. That's when the real test begins." But she saw Cole Maddox occasionally, riding through town, loading supplies at the general store, once repairing a fence near the schoolhouse. He always nodded when their eyes met, a silent acknowledgement, but never stopped to talk. He remained a mystery. The man who'd saved her life, who spoke in fragments, who seemed to exist at the edges of the town rather than in its center. One afternoon in late October, as she was dismissing the children, she looked up and saw him standing by his horse outside the schoolhouse, waiting. Her pulse quickened inexplicably. "Mr. Maddox," she said, stepping outside, "can I help you?" "Got a question for you." He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable, the first time she'd seen him anything less than completely self-assured. "You know horses?" "I've ridden, yes, in Boston." His expression suggested this didn't count for much. "Can you ride out here?" "I don't know." "Why?" "Some of the ranch kids are too far out to come to school regular. Thought if you could ride, you might visit them. Teach them once a week or so." He paused. "I could show you the routes. Make sure you don't get lost." Evelyn considered this. It was both an offer of help and a test. Could she handle the frontier on its own terms, or would she insist on staying within the safe boundaries of town? "When would we start?" she asked. "Tomorrow. If you're willing." "I am." He nodded, that slight twitch of his mouth that might have been approval. "Bring a coat. It'll be cold." He arrived just after dawn, leading a second horse, a gray mare with intelligent eyes and a patient manner. Evelyn had dressed in her most practical clothing, but Cole took one look at her and disappeared into the general store, emerging with a heavy sheepskin coat. "Wear this," he said, handing it to her. "Yours won't be enough." She wanted to argue, to assert her independence, but the coat was warm and heavy and clearly necessary. She put it on. Cole showed her how to mount, how to sit, how to hold the reins. His instructions were brief and precise, his hands impersonal when he adjusted her posture. Then he swung onto his own horse, and they rode out. The prairie was different from horseback, larger, more immediate, more beautiful. Evelyn focused on staying balanced, following Cole's lead as they moved through the grassland. He rode ahead, glancing back occasionally to make sure she was managing, but mostly leaving her to figure it out herself. After an hour, he stopped at a small creek and dismounted. Evelyn followed, legs shaky, and walked the stiffness out. "You're doing fine," Cole said, which coming from him felt like high praise. "It's harder than I expected." "Most things are." He studied the horizon, then looked back at her. "Why'd you come out here, really?" The question surprised her. She'd answered it 100 times in Boston. Adventure, opportunity, making a difference. But standing in the middle of the prairie with this quiet, watchful man, the rehearsed answers felt hollow. "I wanted," she said slowly, "to matter. In Boston, I taught at a finishing school. Rich girls who didn't care about learning, who were just marking time until marriage. I was decorative, replaceable. I wanted to teach children who actually needed education, in a place where it would make a real difference." Cole listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded. "You're making a difference," he said. "Kids talk about you. Sam Henderson actually reads now. His pa didn't think that would happen." Warmth spread through Evelyn's chest, unexpected and profound. "Thank you for telling me that." "Just the truth." He mounted his horse again. "Ready to keep going?" They rode for another 2 hours, Cole pointing out landmarks. A distinctive rock formation, a lone tree, a bend in a dry creek bed, teaching her to navigate this featureless-seeming landscape. He showed her where 3 ranch families lived, scattered across the prairie, too far from town for daily school attendance. "You'll visit them in rotation," he said. "Week 1, Henderson Place. Week 2, Morrison Ranch. Week 3, the Kowalskis. I'll ride with you the first few times. After that, you'll know the way." "What if I get lost?" "Don't." But he said it without judgment, just fact. "Stay oriented, watch the sun, trust your horse, she knows the way home." As the afternoon wore on and they turned back toward town, Evelyn felt something shift. The prairie felt less alien, the distances less terrifying. She was learning its language, its rules, and Cole, silent, watchful Cole, was teaching her without making it feel like teaching. When they reached the edge of town, he stopped. "Tomorrow?" he asked. "Tomorrow," she agreed. He nodded and rode away, and Evelyn watched him go, feeling the strangest sensation, like something was beginning, though she couldn't name what. The sun was setting over the prairie, painting everything gold, and for the first time since arriving, Evelyn Carter felt like she might actually survive this place. More than survive. She might even belong. The riding lessons became a ritual. Every morning, for 2 weeks, Cole appeared at dawn with the gray mare, and Evelyn met him wearing the sheepskin coat that now smelled of prairie wind and horse sweat. They rode in near silence, Cole pointing out details she'd never have noticed on her own, the way certain grasses indicated water nearby, how to read the sky for coming weather, which animal tracks meant danger, and which were harmless. He never said more than necessary, but his teaching was thorough. By the end of the first week, Evelyn could mount without help. By the end of the second, she could navigate to the Henderson Ranch on her own, though Cole still rode alongside, a silent presence she'd grown unexpectedly comfortable with. On the third Wednesday, she made her first solo visit to the Morrison Ranch. Cole had surveyed her that morning with his usual assessing look, then nodded once and said, "You're ready. You're not coming?" "Don't need to." He adjusted his hat, preparing to ride in the opposite direction. "You know the way. Sarah Morrison's expecting you around 10. Don't stay past 3. You need daylight to get back." Evelyn felt a flutter of anxiety, but also something else. Pride, maybe. That this man who wasted no words on false praise believed she could handle it. The ride took 2 hours. The Morrison place appeared gradually. First a windmill turning slowly against the sky, then a barn, then a small house with smoke rising from the chimney. 3 children burst from the doorway as Evelyn approached, shouting with excitement at this break in their isolated routine. Sarah Morrison was younger than Evelyn expected, maybe 25, with tired eyes and capable hands. She welcomed Evelyn with fierce gratitude, setting up a space at the kitchen table for lessons while the youngest child napped and the older 2, a boy of 9 and a girl of 7, hung on Evelyn's every word. They were hungry for learning in a way that broke her heart. The boy could barely read, but he tried so hard his forehead creased with concentration. The girl knew her numbers, but had never seen a proper mathematics problem written out. Evelyn spent 3 hours with them, and when she finally had to leave, the girl's eyes filled with tears. "You'll come back?" she asked, small hand gripping Evelyn's sleeve. "Every week," Evelyn promised. "I'll bring new books next time." The ride home felt different, longer, colder, but suffused with purpose. She'd done something today that mattered, reached children who had no other access to education. This was why she'd come west, not for adventure or escape, but for this exact moment. She arrived back in town just as the sun touched the horizon, her body aching from hours in the saddle, but her spirit lighter than it had been in months. As she dismounted at the stable, she saw Cole across the street, loading supplies into his wagon. He glanced over, caught her eye, and nodded. Just once, but with what might have been approval. That night her hands were too sore to hold a pen properly, and her legs trembled when she walked, but she fell asleep smiling. The next morning she found a jar of salve on the schoolhouse step, unlabeled but clearly meant for saddle sores and blistered hands. She didn't need to ask who'd left it. November arrived with biting winds and the first serious cold. The children showed up to school bundled in layers, their cheeks red, and Evelyn kept the stove burning hot enough that the room became stuffy by afternoon. She continued her weekly rides to the outlying ranches, and gradually the routine shaped her body into something stronger, harder, more resilient than it had ever been in Boston. The town's attitude toward her shifted in ways both subtle and obvious. Martha Webb invited her to a quilting circle, where the women gathered at Mrs. Buss Kimball's boarding house and worked while gossiping with the ruthless efficiency of those who had little entertainment and made the most of what they had. Evelyn expected to be the subject of their scrutiny, but instead found herself drawn into conversations about everything from preserving vegetables to the territorial governor's latest pronouncements. "You're doing well with the children," Martha said one evening, threading her needle with practiced precision. "Better than I expected, to be honest." "You didn't think I'd last," Evelyn said, not quite a question. "I didn't think you'd adapt." Martha looked at her directly. "Most people from back east, they come out here with fixed ideas about how things should be. When reality doesn't match, they break. You bent instead." It was the closest thing to a compliment Martha had given, and Evelyn felt absurdly pleased. "The frontier demands it," she said. "The frontier demands a lot of things. Not everyone's willing to pay the price." Later, walking back to the schoolhouse through the cold dark, Evelyn thought about that. What price had she paid? Her comfort, certainly, her soft hands and sheltered life, the expectations of her family, the approval of Boston society. But what had she gained? Purpose, respect earned rather than given, the satisfaction of exhaustion that came from meaningful work. And something else, something she was only beginning to acknowledge, a sense of home in the last place she'd expected to find it. The schoolhouse was dark when she arrived, and she fumbled for matches to light the lamp. As the flame caught and spread, illuminating her small living quarters, she saw them, a stack of firewood beside the stove, neatly split and arranged. More than she'd had that morning. Far more. She knew without asking. Cole. He did things like that. Small acts of practical kindness, never mentioned, never acknowledged. Firewood when hers ran low. A broken latch on the door repaired. Fresh water in the barrel when she forgot to fetch it herself. He moved through her life like a ghost, helping without asking for recognition, and she was starting to understand that this was his language. Not words. Actions. She wanted to thank him, but something told her that would embarrass them both. So instead, she used the firewood, kept herself warm, and resolved to find her own way to reciprocate. The opportunity came 2 weeks later. She was teaching arithmetic when Sam Henderson burst through the door, breathless and wild-eyed. "Miss Carter, Cole Maddox has been hurt. They need help at the Hendersons' place." Evelyn's heart stopped. "How badly?" "Don't know. Pa sent me to fetch anyone who can help." Sam was already turning to leave. "They got him to our place 'cause it's closer than town." Evelyn dismissed the other children and grabbed her coat. She knew basic first aid, what educated women didn't, but frontier injuries were different from treating a child's scraped knee. Still, she had to try. The Henderson Ranch was a hard 45-minute ride. She pushed the mare faster than she should have, arriving with her heart pounding and her hands shaking from more than cold. Tom Henderson met her outside the barn, his face grim. "How bad?" she asked, sliding from the saddle. "Bad enough." Horse threw him, caught his leg in the stirrup, dragged him a ways before he got loose. Tom led her inside. "He's conscious, but he won't let us fetch the doctor from Millerville." "Why not?" "Because he's a stubborn fool." This from Sarah Morrison, who was kneeling beside a makeshift pallet in the barn. She looked up at Evelyn with relief. "Thank heaven you're here. Maybe he'll listen to someone with sense." Cole lay on the pallet, covered with a blanket, his face pale beneath the dirt and a nasty cut across his forehead. His eyes were open, though, tracking Evelyn as she approached, and despite everything, she felt a wash of relief. Conscious meant not dying. Probably. "Mr. Maddox," she said, kneeling beside him, "I hear you're being difficult." "I'm fine." His voice was strained, tight with pain he was clearly trying to hide. "You don't look fine. Let me see." He started to protest, but Sarah had already pulled back the blanket, revealing his left leg. Evelyn's stomach turned. His pants were torn and bloody, the leg bent at an angle that couldn't be natural. Not broken, she thought. She'd seen breaks before, and this was different. Dislocated, maybe, or badly wrenched. "We need to get you to a doctor," she said firmly. "It's 50 miles to Millerville. I'm not making that ride." "Then the doctor needs to come here." "Not worth the expense." Cole tried to sit up, then fell back with a hiss of pain. "Just needs rest." Evelyn looked at Tom Henderson, who shrugged helplessly. Stubborn didn't begin to cover it. She turned back to Cole, making a decision. "You saved my life," she said quietly. "Remember? When I was freezing to death at the way station. You didn't ask if it was worth it. You just did what needed doing." She held his gaze. "Now it's my turn. Tom's going to ride for the doctor. Sarah and I will stay with you, and you're going to accept help, because that's what people do in a community." Cole stared at her, something flickering in his dark eyes. Surprise, maybe, or the beginning of acceptance. Finally, he nodded once. Tom left immediately. Sarah brought water and clean cloths, and together she and Evelyn carefully cleaned the worst of the dirt and blood from Cole's injuries. The leg was the main concern, swollen and discolored, but there was also the head wound, various scrapes and bruises, and what Evelyn suspected were cracked ribs from the way he flinched when Sarah probed his left side. "You're lucky you didn't break your neck," Sarah said, none too gently. "Horse spooked," Cole said through gritted teeth. Rattlesnake wasn't expecting it this late in the season. They worked in silence for a while, and Evelyn found herself hyper-aware of Cole's presence. The controlled way he breathed through the pain, the tensing of muscles when they touched injured areas, the absolute refusal to complain or show weakness beyond what was unavoidable. It was maddening and admirable in equal measure. "Why do you do that?" she asked suddenly. "Do what?" "Act like you don't need anyone, like accepting help is some kind of failure." Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Out here, you learn to rely on yourself, because most of the time, that's all you've got." "But you don't just have yourself," Evelyn said, wringing out a cloth with more force than necessary. "You have a community, people who care what happens to you. Why is that so hard to accept?" He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Because when you let people in, you give them power to hurt you. Safer to stay separate." "Safer," Evelyn echoed, "and lonelier." "Maybe." Sarah glanced between them, then stood abruptly. "I'm going to check on the children. Holler if you need me." She disappeared, leaving them alone in the barn's dim interior. Evelyn continued cleaning the cut on Cole's forehead, acutely conscious of how close she was to him, how her hands trembled slightly as they worked. "You didn't stay separate with me," she said quietly. "You could have ridden past that way station, but you didn't. That was different." "How?" "You were dying. And if I hadn't been? If I'd just been stranded, cold and scared, but not yet in danger, would you still have stopped?" Cole held her gaze, and she saw the answer there before he spoke it. "Yes." The word hung between them, heavy with implication. Evelyn's hand stilled on his forehead, the cloth forgotten. Something was shifting, had been shifting for weeks now, and she was only just allowing herself to name it. "Why?" she whispered. "Because—" He stopped, seeming to struggle with words in a way she'd never seen from him. "Because you looked lost, and I know what that feels like." The vulnerability in his voice undid something in her chest. This man who said so little, who kept everyone at arm's length, was letting her see beneath the armor. She wanted to say something profound, something that would match the weight of the moment, but before she could find the words, hoofbeats sounded outside. The doctor had arrived, impossibly fast. Tom must have met him on the road. The moment fractured as Sarah returned and the barn filled with professional efficiency. The doctor, a gruff man named Patterson, examined Cole with impersonal thoroughness, prodding and questioning and finally declaring the leg severely sprained but not broken, the ribs bruised but intact, the head wound superficial. "You'll live," he said, "but you'll be off that leg for at least 2 weeks, longer if you want it to heal properly." "I've got a ranch to run," Cole protested, "and you'll run it into the ground if you don't let yourself heal. Get someone to help with the heavy work. And for heaven's sake, man, stop acting like asking for help is a mortal sin." The doctor left instructions and laudanum for the pain, collected his fee from Tom Henderson, who refused Cole's attempt to pay, and departed. Sarah made up a bed in the house, but Cole insisted on staying in the barn. "I'll keep watch on him tonight," Evelyn heard herself say. "Make sure the fever doesn't spike." Tom and Sarah exchanged a look, but didn't argue. Sarah brought blankets and coffee, set up a chair beside the pallet, and left them alone. The night deepened around them. Cole drifted in and out of sleep, restless with pain despite the laudanum. Evelyn sat watch, adding wood to the small stove in the corner, listening to the wind test the barn walls and thinking about what he'd said. "Because you looked lost." She had been lost. Still was, in many ways, a woman from another world trying to make sense of this one. But she was finding her way, and somehow Cole had been part of that from the very beginning. Around midnight, he woke fully, his eyes finding her in the lamplight. "You should go home," he said, his voice rough. "It's not proper, you being here." "Propriety is a luxury we can't afford, remember?" She smiled slightly. "Besides, I'm a frontier schoolteacher now. The rules are different out here." "Still." "Cole." She leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "I'm staying. Accept it." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Stubborn woman. "I learned from the best." The corner of his mouth lifted, an actual smile, small but real. It transformed his face, softening the hard lines, and Evelyn felt warmth bloom in her chest. They talked through the night in fragments, about his ranch, about her teaching, about the difference between winter in Boston and winter on the prairie. He told her about coming west 10 years ago, running from a life that didn't fit, building something with his own hands. She told him about the pressure to marry well, to become someone's decorative wife, to shrink herself into acceptability. "You're not the shrinking type," Cole observed. "No," Evelyn agreed. "I tried. It nearly killed me." "The frontier suits you better." "I think it does." She paused. "Though I never expected that." "Life's full of unexpected things." He shifted, wincing. "Some good, some bad, mostly just different than you planned." Is that philosophy or experience talking? Both. As dawn approached, painting the barn walls with pale light, Evelyn realized she'd never felt more awake, more present, more alive than in this moment, sitting in a drafty barn, watching over an injured man, talking about nothing and everything. This wasn't the life she'd imagined for herself, but it was becoming the life she wanted. Tom Henderson appeared with breakfast, taking over the watch so Evelyn could ride back to town. She was teaching today, and she'd already missed the first hour. But before she left, she leaned down and said quietly, "I'll come back this afternoon. Check on you." "You don't need to." "I know." She met his eyes. "I'm coming anyway." She rode back through the cold morning, exhausted but strangely energized, and arrived at the schoolhouse to find the children waiting patiently on the steps. They'd let themselves in, started the stove, and even organized the day's lessons based on what they'd seen her prepare yesterday. "We figured you'd be late," Sam Henderson said almost shyly. "Because of Mr. Maddox, so we got things ready." Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes. These children, who'd tested her mercilessly those first weeks, had grown into something more than students. They were her community, looking out for her the way she looked out for them. "Thank you," she said. "That was very thoughtful." The day passed in a blur. Evelyn taught on automatic, her mind half with the children and half back at the Henderson ranch, wondering if Cole was resting properly, if the pain had eased, if he was following doctor's orders or stubbornly trying to do too much. When 3 o'clock finally arrived, she dismissed the children and rode out again. This became her routine for the next week. Teach during the day, ride to the Hendersons in the evening, sit with Cole while he healed. They talked more in those evenings than they had in all their previous conversations combined. She learned about his childhood in Pennsylvania, his brief failed attempt at city life, the way the open prairie had saved him when he'd been drowning in expectations and obligations. He learned about her mother's disappointment, her father's detached support, the suffocating smallness of her Boston existence. "Did you love him?" Cole asked one evening. "The man they wanted you to marry?" "Roger?" Evelyn laughed bitterly. "I barely knew him. He was appropriate, respectable. Everything a man should be on paper." "That's not what I asked." "No." She looked at him directly. "I didn't love him. I didn't even like him very much. He was boring and pompous, and he talked to me like I was a child." "Then why consider it?" "Because that's what women do. We marry well. We make advantageous matches. We become someone's wife instead of someone ourselves." She paused. "Or we did, until we decide we'd rather risk everything on something real." The intensity in Cole's eyes made her pulse quicken. "And have you found something real out here?" "I'm starting to." The words hung between them, charged with meaning neither quite dared to name. Cole shifted, reaching out, and his hand found hers. His palm was calloused and warm, and the simple contact sent electricity up her arm. "Evelyn," he said, and the sound of her name in his rough voice did something to her insides. But before either could say more, Tom Henderson appeared in the barn doorway, tactfully clearing his throat. "Supper's ready, if you're interested, Miss Carter. And Cole, the doc's back for a follow-up." The moment broke. Evelyn withdrew her hand, standing quickly, aware that her face was flushed. "I should go. It's getting dark." "Tomorrow?" Cole asked. "Tomorrow." She rode home through the twilight, her hand still tingling where he'd touched it, and had to admit what she'd been avoiding for weeks. She was falling for Cole Maddox, the quiet rancher who spoke in sentences of 3 words or less, who showed care through actions rather than declarations, who'd saved her life and then stepped back, letting her find her own strength. It was inconvenient, complicated, and absolutely undeniable. By the second week, Cole was up and moving, though still limping. He insisted on riding back to his own ranch despite protests, and Evelyn found herself making excuses to visit, bringing books she thought he might like, checking on his recovery, staying for coffee that turned into dinner that turned into long conversations on his porch as the sun set. His ranch was modest but well-maintained, a house he'd built himself, a barn for his horses, corrals and outbuildings arranged with practical efficiency. Everything spoke of hard work and self-sufficiency. He showed her around with quiet pride, pointing out improvements he'd made, plans for expansion. "You've built something good here," Evelyn said, standing on his porch, looking out at the prairie turning gold in the evening light. "It's a start." He stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "A lot of work left to do." "Will you do it alone?" The question came out before she could stop it. Cole turned to look at her, and she saw understanding in his eyes. "I don't know," he said quietly. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether someone might want to share it with me." Evelyn's breath caught. This was as close to a declaration as Cole Maddox was likely to get. Careful, conditional, but unmistakably real. She turned to face him fully, heart hammering. "If you're asking, I'm asking," he interrupted. "If you're happy here, in Cutter's Junction, if this life," he gestured at the prairie, the ranch, the endless sky, "is something you could want, long term." "Yes," she said simply. "I am happy here, happier than I've ever been." "Even though it's hard? Even though it's nothing like what you knew?" "Especially because of that." She took a breath, finding courage. I didn't come west to find an easier life, Cole. I came to find a real one. And I have. Teaching those children, being part of this community, learning to survive out here, it's made me into someone I actually recognize, someone I like. I like her too, Cole said softly. The words were simple, but they landed like a physical touch. Evelyn felt tears threaten, overwhelmed by the enormity of what was happening. This quiet, careful man opening himself to her, offering something he'd probably never offered anyone. Cole, don't answer yet. He stepped back slightly, giving her space. You should be sure. This isn't easy. Partnering with a rancher, long hours, hard winters, uncertainty, and I'm not... He struggled for words. I'm not good with words. Never have been. I won't write you poetry or make pretty speeches. I don't need poetry, Evelyn said. I need honesty, partnership, someone who sees me as an equal. You're more than equal. He smiled slightly. You're better educated, better spoken, better at dealing with people. I'm just stubborn and good with horses. And kind, Evelyn added, and reliable, and brave enough to save stranded school teachers from freezing to death. That was just common sense. No, she said firmly. It was character. You saw someone in trouble and you helped. You didn't know me, didn't owe me anything, but you stopped anyway. That says everything about who you are. Cole looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached out and took her hand again. This time, he didn't let go. Stay for supper, he said, and we can talk about what comes next. Evelyn nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. She stayed, they talked, and somewhere between the meal and the firelight, and the easy silence that fell between them, she felt the future shift. Not just her future, but theirs, together. When she finally rode back to town that night, stars blazing overhead, and her heart full to bursting, she knew with absolute certainty she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The town noticed the change before either of them announced it. Small communities had eyes everywhere, and when Cole Maddox started appearing in Cutter's Junction more frequently, stopping by the schoolhouse at day's end, walking Evelyn to the boarding house for supper, sitting beside her at the Sunday service he'd never attended before, speculation ran wild. Martha Webb cornered Evelyn at the quilting circle 3 weeks after that evening on Cole's porch. The other women had conveniently found reasons to drift to the far side of the room, leaving them alone with their needlework. So, Martha said, her tone carefully neutral. You and Cole Maddox. Evelyn felt heat rise to her cheeks, but kept her stitching steady. What about us? Don't play coy with me, girl. The whole town's talking. Are his intentions honorable? His intentions, Evelyn said quietly, are none of the town's business. But yes, they're honorable. Martha's stern expression softened slightly. Good. Cole's a good man. Keeps to himself too much, always has, but he's solid, reliable. The kind of man you can build a life with out here. She paused, then added, not easy, though. Ranch life, especially in winter. Nothing out here is easy, Evelyn replied. I've learned that much. But you're staying anyway. It wasn't a question, but Evelyn answered it. I'm staying. Martha nodded, satisfied, and the other women drifted back as if on cue, filling the room with chatter about preserving and livestock and the new family that had moved in 20 miles south. But Evelyn caught approving glances, small smiles, and realized she'd just passed some invisible test. The community was accepting not just her presence, but her future here. That future crystallized on a cold afternoon in early December when Cole rode into town pulling a small wagon loaded with lumber. He stopped at the schoolhouse, and Evelyn came out to meet him, wrapping her shawl tight against the wind. What's all this? She asked. Repairs. He gestured at the schoolhouse's sagging roof, the cracked window he'd fixed once, but that had cracked again. Winter's coming hard. Building won't make it through in this condition. Cole, you don't have to... I know. He climbed down, started unloading boards. But I'm going to anyway. Dismiss the children early today. This'll be noisy. Tom Henderson appeared an hour later, then Dutch the blacksmith. Then 3 other men from town, all arriving without being asked, all carrying tools. They worked through the afternoon, hammering and sawing, replacing rotten boards and reinforcing the roof structure. Evelyn brought coffee and watched, moved by this casual display of community, men stopping their own work to help, asking nothing in return except the knowledge that the schoolhouse would stand through winter. Cole directed the work with quiet authority, pointing out problems, suggesting solutions, working harder than anyone despite his legs still not being fully healed. Evelyn saw him wince when he put too much weight on it, but he never stopped, never complained. As the sun began to set and the work neared completion, she brought him coffee on the roof, where he was hammering down the last shingles. "You should rest that leg," she said. "Almost done." He took the coffee gratefully, drank half of it in one long swallow. "Can't leave a job half finished." "Cole," she waited until he looked at her. "Thank you for all of this. Just practical sense. Can't have the school falling down. It's more than that." She kept her voice low, aware of the other men working nearby. "You're taking care of what matters to me. That means something." His expression softened. "You matter to me, Evelyn. Everything about you. What you care about, what you need, what makes you happy." He set down his hammer, regarding her seriously. "I want you to know that before winter really hits, before things get harder. I'm not going anywhere. Whatever you need, whatever you want to build here, I'm part of it, if you'll have me." Evelyn felt her throat tighten. This man who struggled with words was offering her everything he had in the only way he knew how, through action, through presence, through unwavering commitment. "I'll have you," she whispered. Cole's smile was small, but transformative. He reached out, his work-roughened hand gentle against her cheek, and for a moment the world narrowed to just them, two people who'd found each other in the least likely place, against all odds. "Miss Carter," Sam Henderson's voice broke the moment. "Ma says supper's ready at our place if you and Mr. Maddox want to come." The invitation extended to everyone who'd helped with the repairs, and soon they were all crowded into the Henderson kitchen, eating stew and fresh bread while the children darted between adults and Sarah Henderson orchestrated chaos with the ease of long practice. Evelyn sat beside Cole at the long table, their shoulders touching, and felt a sense of belonging so profound it nearly overwhelmed her. This was family, not by blood, but by choice and circumstance and shared struggle. This was home. Later, after the meal, Tom Henderson pulled Cole aside while Evelyn helped Sarah with the dishes. Through the kitchen window, she could see them talking seriously, Tom gesturing at something, Cole listening with his characteristic intensity. When they returned, Cole's expression was thoughtful. "Everything all right?" Evelyn asked quietly as they prepared to leave. "Tom offered to sell me the north section of his land, 40 acres bordering my property." Cole helped her into her coat, his movements careful. "Says his boys aren't interested in ranching, and he'd rather see it go to someone who'll use it properly." "That's wonderful, isn't it?" "It's expensive. Would take everything I've saved plus a loan from the bank." He paused. "But it would nearly double my grazing land, make the ranch viable long term. Then you should do it. That's a big decision to make alone." The implication hung between them. Evelyn's pulse quickened. "Are you saying you don't want to make it alone?" Cole met her eyes. "I'm saying that if we're building something together, you should have a say in the big decisions. This affects both of us. Both of us." The words settled over Evelyn like a warm cloak. He was already thinking of them as a unit, a partnership, not asking her to be some decorative addition to his life, but an equal voice in shaping their future. "Buy the land," she said firmly. "It's a good investment, and we'll figure out the rest together." "We," Cole repeated, as if testing the word. Then he smiled. "All right then, together." They rode back to town through the darkness, the cold biting but the stars brilliant overhead. Cole saw her to the schoolhouse door, lingering for a moment that stretched into comfortable silence. "Evelyn," he said finally, "I want to do this properly, court you the right way. I know I'm not much for romance or fancy gestures, but stop." She placed her hand over his. "You've been courting me since the day you saved my life. Every ride you took me on, every skill you taught me, every small kindness you showed, that was courting. You just did it in your own language. Actions instead of words." "Exactly." And I understood every word. Cole pulled her closer, slowly enough that she could pull away if she wanted. She didn't. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and careful and entirely right. A promise made without speaking, a future claimed in the simple press of warmth against the cold. When they finally parted, both breathless, Evelyn felt like something fundamental had shifted, not just between them, but in her entire understanding of what love could be. This wasn't the passionate declarations of novels or the performative romance of Boston courtship. This was deeper, quieter, built on trust and respect, and the slow, steady accumulation of shared experiences. "Good night, Cole," she whispered. "Good night, Evelyn." He touched her face once more, then mounted his horse and rode into the darkness, leaving her standing in the doorway with her heart racing and her future suddenly, brilliantly clear. The next weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Winter was coming in earnest, and everyone in Cutter's Junction could feel it, the quality of the cold changing, becoming sharper, more insistent. Evelyn continued teaching, but the children's attendance grew sporadic as families prepared for the hard months ahead. She used the time to deepen lessons with those who could come, working one-on-one, discovering each child's strengths and gaps. Cole finalized the land purchase and began working longer hours, preparing for winter while making the most of decent weather. Evelyn saw him less during the day, but more in the evenings, when he'd appear at the schoolhouse door with wood for her stove or fresh meat from hunting, staying for coffee that turned into supper that turned into long conversations by lamplight. They talked about everything and nothing. His plans for the expanded ranch, her ideas for improving the school. Their childhood so different yet marked by similar feelings of not quite fitting. Dreams they'd abandoned and dreams they were building new. "Did you always want to ranch?" Evelyn asked one evening as they sat by her small stove, the wind howling outside. "No. Started as a farm laborer back east. Hated it. Too many rules, too many people telling me how to live." Cole stretched his bad leg out, still favoring it slightly. "Saved every penny for 5 years, then headed west. Figured I'd rather fail at something I chose than succeed at something that wasn't mine." "And you didn't fail?" "Haven't yet. But it's a near thing sometimes." He smiled ruefully. "Ranch life is one crisis after another. Drought, harsh winters, predators, prices falling. You solve one problem and 3 more pop up." "Sounds like teaching," Evelyn said wryly. "You think you've got a child reading, then discover they can't do basic arithmetic. You fix the roof, then the stove breaks." "We're both in the problem-solving business, then." "Apparently so." Cole was quiet for a moment, then said, "I like that about you, that you don't need everything to be perfect. You just adapt and keep going. I learned from the frontier, it doesn't give you much choice. It gives you plenty of choice. Most people choose to leave. You chose to stay." The conviction in his voice warmed her more than the stove. She reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together, and they sat in comfortable silence while the wind tried to find ways through the walls. The first real snow came in mid-December, transforming the prairie overnight. Evelyn woke to a world gone white and silent, snow piled against the schoolhouse door, and for a moment felt childlike wonder. Then practical concerns took over. She had to dig herself out, restart the stove that had died overnight, fetch water from the pump that was now surrounded by drifts. No children appeared for school that day, which didn't surprise her. The storm had been fierce, and families would be focused on survival, not education. She spent the day reading, mending clothes, and trying not to worry about Cole alone at his ranch in this weather. He appeared at noon, riding through snow that came up to his horse's knees, leading a pack horse loaded with supplies. "You didn't have to come in this," Evelyn said, pulling him inside, brushing snow from his coat. "Wanted to make sure you had enough wood, enough food." He started unloading. Firewood, smoked meat, flour, coffee, candles. "Storm's supposed to get worse tonight. You might be snowed in for a few days." "What about you? Your ranch?" "Horses are secured, stock fed. I can manage." He stacked wood by the stove with practiced efficiency. "You're more exposed here in town. Wanted to be sure you'd be all right." Evelyn watched him work, this man who'd ridden through a blizzard to bring her firewood, and felt love swell so large in her chest it almost hurt. Not the fluttery romance of storybooks, but something deeper and more durable. The kind of love that showed up in snowstorms, that thought about practical necessities, that treated her safety as something worth risking his own comfort. "Cole." She waited until he looked at her. "I love you." The words hung in the air between them, simple and enormous. Cole went very still, his dark eyes searching hers. "You don't have to say that," he said quietly. "I know I'm not saying it because I think you need to hear it. I'm saying it because it's true." Evelyn stepped closer. "I love you. The way you show up. The way you take care of people without making it a big production. The way you see me as capable, but still want to help anyway. All of it. I love all of it." Cole set down the wood he was holding and crossed to her in 2 strides. When he kissed her this time, it was different, less careful, more certain, carrying the weight of everything they'd been building toward. Evelyn melted into it, her hands finding their way to his shoulders, his chest, feeling the solid reality of him. "I love you too," he said against her lips. "Probably have since you told off Martha Webb that first week. Watching you fight for your place here, refusing to give up. That's when I knew." "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I wanted you to choose this life for yourself first, not for me." He pulled back enough to see her face. "I needed you to know you could make it here on your own, that you were strong enough, capable enough, otherwise it wouldn't be fair to ask you to stay. And now? Now I'm asking." His voice was rough with emotion. "Stay, Evelyn. Not just in Cutter's Junction. Stay with me. Build something with me. Marry me." The proposal was so like him, direct, unadorned, absolutely sincere. Evelyn felt tears slip down her cheeks even as she smiled. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." Cole's answering smile was brilliant, transforming his usually serious face into something almost boyish. He kissed her again and again until they were both laughing between kisses, giddy with relief and joy and the sheer impossibility of having found each other. The storm raged outside for 3 days, burying Cutter's Junction under 2 feet of snow. Evelyn and Cole were stranded together in the schoolhouse, which would have scandalized Boston society, but barely raised eyebrows on the frontier where survival trumped propriety. They talked and planned and dreamed out loud, mapping a future that felt both terrifying and absolutely right. "Where will we live?" Evelyn asked, wrapped in blankets beside the stove, while Cole prepared a simple meal from his supplies. "The ranch. I'll add on to the house, build you a proper kitchen, a room for books. Whatever you need." He glanced back at her. "You can keep teaching if you want. We'll figure out the logistics. You'd be all right with that? A wife who works?" "Evelyn, I've seen you teach. Seen what it means to you, what it means to those kids." Cole turned to face her fully. "I'm not asking you to give up who you are. I'm asking you to bring who you are into partnership with me. Your work matters. Keep doing it." "What about children?" The question came out quietly. "If we have them." "When we have them," Cole corrected gently. "We'll figure it out. Same as everything else. Together. Together." That word again, steady as bedrock. Evelyn felt something loosen in her chest, some fear she hadn't fully acknowledged. This wouldn't be like her mother's marriage, where her father made all the decisions and her mother's sphere shrank to social obligations and household management. This would be genuine partnership, built on mutual respect and shared dreams. "Spring wedding?" she suggested. "Give us time to prepare, get the word out to families?" "Spring sounds good." Cole came to sit beside her, pulling her close. "Though I'd marry you tomorrow if you wanted. Patience, Mr. Maddox, we've got a lifetime ahead of us." "A lifetime," he repeated, as if testing the sound of it. Then he kissed her temple, her cheek, her lips, soft and sweet. I like the sound of that. When the storm finally broke on the 4th day, they emerged to find Cutter's Junction transformed, pristine white, crystalline, beautiful in its harshness. Neighbors were digging out, checking on each other, assessing damage. Cole helped clear the main street before riding back to his ranch, but not before making Evelyn promise to come out the following Sunday to see his plans for the house expansion. The engagement spread through town faster than the snow melt. Martha Webb appeared at the schoolhouse that afternoon with a knowing smile and a basket of preserves. "Heard the news," she said, setting the basket on Evelyn's desk. "Congratulations, you've chosen well." "Thank you, Martha. That means a lot. Cole's a good man, but he's also stubborn and independent to a fault. You'll have your hands full keeping him from working himself to death." Martha's expression softened. But you're stubborn too. You'll balance each other out. I hope so. You will. Martha moved toward the door, then paused. I was wrong about you, Evelyn. When you first arrived, I thought you'd be gone in a month. Thought you were too soft for this life. I'm glad you proved me wrong. I'm glad I did too, Evelyn said softly. After Martha left, Evelyn sat at her desk and pulled out paper and pen. She'd been putting this off, but it was time. She wrote carefully, choosing each word with precision. Dear Mother, I am writing to inform you that I am engaged to be married. His name is Cole Maddox. He is a rancher here in Cutter's Junction. We will marry in the spring. I know this is not the match you envisioned for me. Cole has no family connections, no social standing, no wealth beyond what he's built with his own hands. By Boston standards, I am marrying beneath myself. But by the standards that matter to me, I am marrying exactly right. Cole is honest, hardworking, and kind. He sees me as an equal partner, not an ornament. He supports my teaching and my independence. He has taught me to ride, to navigate the prairie, to survive in a landscape that would have killed me without his help. More than that, I love him. And he loves me. Not for what I could bring to a marriage in terms of connections or dowry, but for who I am as a person. That is worth more than all the appropriate matches in Boston. I am happy here, Mother. Truly happy in a way I never was back east. I have meaningful work. I have a community that values me. And I have found love with a man who makes me better than I was. I hope in time you can accept this, though I understand if you cannot. Either way, I am building a life here that is mine, and I have never been more certain of anything. Your daughter, Evelyn. She sealed the letter before she could second-guess herself and posted it the next morning. Whatever her mother's response, or lack thereof, Evelyn's course was set. She was marrying Cole Maddox, and she was staying on the frontier, and nothing from her old life could change that. The weeks before Christmas were marked by quiet joy and constant work. Evelyn taught when weather permitted, visited the outlying ranches, and spent every spare moment with Cole, planning the wedding, discussing ranch improvements, learning the 1,000 small details of his operation. He taught her about horses, about reading animal behavior, about the economics of ranching. She shared her thoughts on education, community building, the importance of preserving culture even on the frontier. They complemented each other in unexpected ways. Where Cole was taciturn, Evelyn was articulate. Where she was theoretical, he was practical. Together, they formed something stronger than either could be alone. Christmas came simple but sweet. A gathering at the church, modest gifts exchanged, hymns sung by voices roughened by wind and work. Cole gave Evelyn a set of leather-bound journals, beautiful and practical, perfect for recording lessons and thoughts. She gave him a new hat to replace the battered one he'd worn for years, and books on modern ranching techniques she'd ordered from a catalog. Standing together in the cold December night, watching families head home through the snow, Evelyn felt profound gratitude. A year ago, she'd been in Boston, suffocating under expectations, dreading her future. Now she stood on the edge of the prairie with a man she loved and a life she'd chosen, and the contrast was almost overwhelming. "What are you thinking?" Cole asked, his arm warm around her waist. "That I'm glad the stage driver left me at the wrong station," Evelyn said. "That I'm glad I nearly froze to death, because it brought me here. To this. To you." Cole pulled her closer. Wouldn't have had it any other way. They stood together as snow began to fall again, soft and steady, covering everything in quiet white. The frontier winter was just beginning, with all its hardships and dangers ahead. But Evelyn wasn't afraid. Whatever came, they would face it together. And that made all the difference. January arrived with a cold so severe it felt personal, like the frontier itself was testing their resolve. The temperature dropped until water froze solid in minutes, until breath crystallized in the air, until even the hardiest ranchers spoke of the cold with cautious respect. School attendance dropped to almost nothing, families keeping children close, unwilling to risk the journey in such brutal conditions. Evelyn used the quiet days to prepare for spring, organizing lessons and supplies, but mostly she worried about Cole. The ranch demanded constant attention in weather like this, checking on livestock, breaking ice so animals could drink, ensuring nothing froze or failed catastrophically. He came to town less often, and when he did, he looked exhausted, his face raw from wind, his hands cracked despite the salve she'd given him. "You're working too hard," she told him one evening when he'd ridden in to bring her more wood. "You'll run yourself into the ground." "Can't be helped. Animals don't stop needing care because it's cold." He warmed his hands by her stove, wincing as feeling returned to his fingers. "Another month, and the worst should be past." "Let me help. I could ride out on weekends, take some of the burden." "No." His voice was sharp, then softened when he saw her expression. "It's too dangerous, Evelyn. The cold, the distance. If something went wrong, if you got lost or the weather turned." He stopped, jaw tight. "I can't risk that. But I can risk you working yourself to exhaustion? That's different." "How?" Cole was quiet for a long moment, staring into the stove's glow. "Because if something happened to me, you'd survive. You've proven that. But if something happened to you," his voice dropped, "I don't think I would." The raw honesty of it silenced any argument Evelyn might have made. She crossed to him, taking his cold, roughened hands in hers. "Then we both need to be careful," she said quietly. "Because I feel the same way about you." He pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head, and they stood that way for a long time, drawing warmth and comfort from each other while the wind howled its fury outside. The next morning dawned clear but brutally cold, the kind of cold that made the inside of your nose freeze when you breathed. Evelyn woke to silence. No wind, which somehow felt more ominous than the constant howling. She dressed in layers, started the fire, and was preparing coffee when she heard horses outside. It was Tom Henderson, his face grave. "Miss Carter, we need you at the Morrison place. Sarah's gone into labor early, and with the midwife stuck in Millerville, you're the closest thing we've got to help." Evelyn's stomach dropped. She knew basic first aid, had read about childbirth in medical texts, but actual experience? None. "Tom, I don't know if I'm qualified." "You're educated. You're calm in a crisis. That's more than anyone else has right now." His voice was urgent. "Please, Sarah's asking for you." Evelyn grabbed her coat and medical supplies, such as they were, and climbed into Tom's wagon. The ride to the Morrison Ranch was brutal. 2 hours of bone-shaking cold, her face going numb despite the scarf wrapped around it. Tom drove as fast as he dared, but the frozen ground made the going treacherous. When they arrived, Sarah Morrison was in the bedroom, her face pale and slick with sweat despite the cold, her breathing labored. Her husband John stood helplessly nearby, looking terrified. The 2 older children had been sent to a neighbor's. "Evelyn," Sarah gasped, reaching for her hand. "Thank heaven. I'm so scared." "I know." Evelyn squeezed her hand, projecting a confidence she didn't feel. "But we're going to get through this together. Tell me what's happening." Sarah explained between contractions. The pains had started early that morning, coming stronger and closer together than they should for a first birth. Something felt wrong, though she couldn't articulate what. Evelyn examined her as best she could, drawing on half-remembered medical texts and basic logic, and realized with growing dread that the baby was breech. She'd read about this. The mortality rate was high, especially without a trained midwife or doctor. If the baby didn't turn, if the delivery went wrong, she could lose Sarah, the baby, or both. "John," she said, keeping her voice steady, "I need hot water, clean towels, and whiskey. Tom, ride for Cole Maddox. Tell him what's happening and ask him to fetch the doctor from Millerville if the roads are passable." "That's a 6-hour round trip minimum," Tom said. "I know, do it anyway." After they left, Evelyn turned back to Sarah, who was watching her with frightened eyes. "The baby's not positioned right, is it?" Sarah whispered. "No," Evelyn said honestly, "but I've read about this. There are techniques we can try to turn the baby, and if that doesn't work, we'll manage the delivery as safely as possible." "I could die, couldn't I?" Evelyn wanted to lie, to offer false reassurance, but Sarah deserved the truth. "Yes, but I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you don't. And you're strong, Sarah. Stronger than you know." What followed were the longest hours of Evelyn's life. She worked carefully, methodically, using techniques she'd only read about, trying to turn the baby while Sarah endured pain that made her scream. John held his wife's hand, white-knuckled and silent. Evelyn prayed to instinct and medical knowledge and sheer determination, refusing to let fear paralyze her. Slowly, agonizingly, the baby shifted. Sarah sobbed with relief as Evelyn confirmed the new position, not perfect, but viable. The delivery could proceed. It was full dark when Cole arrived, having made the ride to Millerville and back in record time. The doctor rode with him, but by then, Sarah had delivered a healthy baby girl, small but fierce-lunged, wailing her displeasure at the cold world she'd entered. Sarah lay exhausted but alive, the baby at her breast, and John wept openly with relief. The doctor examined them both, pronounced Evelyn's work adequate if unorthodox, and left instructions for aftercare. Cole stood in the doorway, snow-covered and exhausted, watching Evelyn clean up with steady hands that only started shaking after the crisis had passed. "You did good," he said quietly when she finally emerged from the bedroom. "I was terrified the entire time," Evelyn admitted, letting him pull her close. "What if I'd done something wrong? What if—" "You didn't. You saved them both." He held her tighter. "You're incredible, you know that?" Evelyn leaned into him, drawing strength from his solidity. "I just did what needed doing, like you taught me." The ride back to town happened in darkness, Cole insisting on accompanying her despite his exhaustion. They moved slowly through the frozen landscape, and Evelyn found herself replaying the day, the fear, the responsibility, the overwhelming relief when Sarah and the baby had both survived. "Does it ever get easier?" she asked, "making life or death decisions?" "No," Cole said. "You just get better at trusting yourself to make them." "Is that what you do, on the ranch, when things go wrong?" "Every day. Decide which animals to save, which to let go. Where to invest resources, where to cut losses, whether to risk something for a potential gain or play it safe." He glanced at her. "Leadership is just making hard choices and living with the consequences." "That's a bleak way to look at it." "It's an honest way." He paused. "But it's also why partnerships matter. You don't have to carry it all alone. You share the weight." As Evelyn thought about that, about sharing burdens, about having someone to lean on when the choices became too heavy. That's what marriage would mean, she realized. Not just romance and companionship, but mutual reinforcement. Two people strong enough separately, but stronger together. They reached town near midnight. Cole saw her to the schoolhouse, made sure the fire was built up, and she had everything she needed, then kissed her with a gentleness that made her chest ache. "Get some rest," he said. You've earned it." "You too. Promise me you'll take a day off. Let the ranch run itself for once." "Can't promise that, but I'll try." He touched her face, his calloused fingers tender. "I'm proud of you, Evelyn. What you did today, most people wouldn't have had the courage." After he left, Evelyn sat by the fire and let the tears come. Release after hours of holding herself together. She'd helped bring a life into the world. She'd made decisions that could have gone horribly wrong, but hadn't. She'd proven something to herself about who she was and what she was capable of. The frontier kept testing her, kept demanding more than she thought she had to give, and somehow she kept rising to meet it. The story of Sarah Morrison's delivery spread through Cutter's Junction within days. People looked at Evelyn differently now, not just as the schoolteacher, but as someone who could be counted on in a crisis. Women started coming to her with questions about health, about their children, about problems they'd previously handled alone. Evelyn found herself becoming something more than a teacher, a confidant, an advisor, a pillar of the community. Martha Webb acknowledged it one afternoon at the general store. "You've become one of us," she said simply. "Not just living here, but belonging here. That's rare." "Thank you, Martha." "Don't thank me. You earned it." Martha selected canned goods with her usual efficiency. "Now, let's talk about your wedding. April, you said? We'll need to start planning. The whole town will want to attend." Evelyn hadn't thought about the wedding in weeks, consumed by daily survival and unexpected crises. But Martha was right. Spring was approaching, and with it, the day she'd become Cole's wife. The thought filled her with anticipation and a strange flutter of nerves. Planning began in earnest. The women of the town took charge with enthusiastic efficiency, Martha coordinating logistics, Sarah contributing ideas despite having a newborn, Mrs. Kimball offering the boarding house for a reception. Evelyn found herself swept along in preparations she barely controlled, though she didn't mind. This was the community embracing her, claiming her as one of their own. Cole stayed mostly out of the planning, which Evelyn suspected was deliberate. "Just tell me when and where to show up," he said with a slight smile. "And what I'm supposed to say." "You're supposed to say I do," Evelyn teased. "I can manage that." But he did build, adding on to his house as promised, creating a space that would be theirs. He brought Evelyn out on a mild Sunday in late February to see the progress. The additions were rough but solid: a larger kitchen, a room with built-in shelves for her books, windows positioned to catch morning light. Everything spoke of thoughtful planning, of a man building not just a house but a home. "It's perfect," Evelyn said, walking through the new spaces, imagining their life here. "Cole, it's absolutely perfect. Still needs finishing work. Paint, proper floors. But it'll be done before the wedding." He watched her carefully. "You're sure about this? Living out here, away from town?" "I'm sure." She turned to face him. "This is where you are. This is where we'll build our life. I'm not afraid of the distance. It'll be lonely sometimes, long days when I'm working and you're here alone. Then I'll ride into town and teach, or I'll bring the children out here for lessons, or I'll work on the ranch with you." Evelyn crossed to him, taking his hands. "We'll figure it out, Cole, just like everything else." He pulled her close, kissing her with a passion that still surprised her. This reserved man who showed his feelings through action, but who in private moments let his guard down completely. Evelyn melted into him, feeling desire kindle low in her belly, anticipation for the life they'd share as husband and wife. February gave way to March, and with it came the first hints of spring. The worst cold broke, snow began melting, and the prairie started showing signs of life. Green shoots pushing through dead grass, birds returning, the sun gaining strength. School attendance picked up as families emerged from winter isolation, and Evelyn threw herself into teaching with renewed energy. She also received a letter from Boston, her mother's response, finally, to the engagement announcement. Evelyn opened it with trepidation, expecting condemnation or pleas to reconsider. Instead, she found something more complicated. Her mother wrote of disappointment, yes, but also grudging respect. She couldn't understand Evelyn's choices, couldn't fathom why she'd choose such a hard life. But she acknowledged that Evelyn seemed happy, seemed to have found purpose. The letter ended with a stiff blessing and a request for details about the wedding, though she made clear she wouldn't be attending. It wasn't the enthusiastic support Evelyn might have hoped for, but it was something. An acknowledgement that her path, while not understood, was her own to walk. She folded the letter carefully and tucked it away, feeling a weight lift. She didn't need her mother's approval, but having it, even in this limited form, brought a sense of closure. 3 weeks before the wedding, the unseasonably warm weather turned abruptly. The temperature dropped, the wind picked up, and the sky took on a peculiar yellow-gray tinge that made the old-timers mutter nervously. "Storm coming," Tom Henderson said, stopping by the schoolhouse one afternoon. "Big one, feels like. You should stock up on supplies. Make sure you're prepared." Evelyn did, though it was hard to imagine needing emergency provisions with spring so close. Cole came by that evening with more wood and provisions than seemed necessary. "Tom thinks it'll be bad?" she asked, helping him unload. "Worse than bad. Blizzard, probably." Cole's expression was grim. This time of year they can be vicious. Heavy snow, zero visibility, temperature drops. Whole herds can get lost and freeze. "What about your livestock?" "Secured as best I can, but I'll need to stay at the ranch, keep watch." He gripped her shoulders. "I need you to promise me you'll stay in town. Don't try to ride out no matter what. Wait for the weather to clear." "Cole, promise me, Evelyn." His voice was sharp with fear. "These storms are deadly. People get disoriented, wander off course, freeze within sight of shelter. I can't focus on the ranch if I'm worried about you out in that." "I promise," she said, seeing the genuine terror in his eyes. "I'll stay put." The storm hit the next afternoon with shocking speed. One moment, overcast but calm. The next, wind screaming and snow falling so thick it erased the world. Evelyn watched from the schoolhouse window as visibility dropped to nothing, as the temperature plummeted, as the frontier showed its teeth again. She stayed inside, kept the fire burning, and tried not to worry about Cole alone at the ranch in conditions that could kill in hours. But worry gnawed at her anyway. Was he safe? Were the animals secure? What if something went wrong and he needed help? The first day passed in howling wind and endless snow. The second day brought no relief. By the third day, Evelyn was climbing the walls with anxiety. She'd promised to stay, but the not knowing was torture. On the fourth morning, she woke to silence. The wind had stopped. Evelyn rushed to the window and saw that the storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape buried under snow. The town was digging out, people emerging to check on neighbors, assess damage. But her mind was fixed on one thing: Cole. Was he all right? Had the ranch survived? She knew she should wait for word for someone to ride out and check, but 4 days of fear and uncertainty had pushed her past rational caution. She dressed warmly, saddled her mare, and rode out before anyone could stop her. The journey was brutal. Snow came up to the horse's chest in places, forcing them to move painfully slow. What should have been a 2-hour ride took 4. Evelyn's face went numb. Her hands ached with cold, but she pushed on, driven by fear that wouldn't be silenced. The ranch appeared finally through the white landscape. The house stood intact, smoke rising from the chimney. Relief flooded through Evelyn so powerfully she almost wept. He was alive. Whatever else had happened, Cole was alive. She dismounted clumsily, legs stiff with cold, and started toward the house. The door opened before she reached it. Cole stood there, staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. Then he was moving, crossing the distance between them in long strides, and she had just enough time to register that he looked furious before he pulled her into his arms. "What were you thinking?" His voice was rough, shaking. "You promised to stay in town. You promised." "I had to know you were safe," Evelyn said into his chest. 4 days with no word? I couldn't just... You could have died. He pulled back enough to look at her, and she saw real anger warring with relief in his eyes. "This storm was exactly what I warned you about. You could have gotten lost, frozen, and I wouldn't have even known to look for you until it was too late." "But I didn't. I'm fine. This time." His hands gripped her shoulders, almost painful. "Evelyn, you can't do things like this. The frontier doesn't care about bravery or good intentions. It kills people who take unnecessary risks." "It wasn't unnecessary," she said, her own anger rising. "You're not unnecessary. The man I love, alone in a blizzard, that's not a risk I could ignore." "Then you understand how I feel every time you do something dangerous." He released her shoulders, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "This is what it means, Evelyn, loving someone out here. It means constant fear that something will happen to them. It means making hard choices between what you want to do and what's safe. It means trusting them to keep themselves alive when you can't be there to protect them." Evelyn stared at him, seeing the depth of his fear, understanding suddenly what her reckless ride had cost him. Not just worry, but a fundamental breach of trust. She'd promised to stay safe, and then she'd broken that promise the moment it became inconvenient. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "You're right. I shouldn't have come. I was selfish." "You were scared. I get that." Cole's anger was draining away, leaving exhaustion in its wake. "But we have to be able to trust each other, Evelyn. When I say it's dangerous, when I ask you to wait, I need to know you'll listen. Just like you need to know I'll come back to you, that I won't take stupid risks out of stubbornness. Can you promise that? Not to take stupid risks?" He smiled faintly. "I can promise to try, and to let you call me on it when I don't." "Deal." Evelyn stepped closer, her hands finding his. "I'm sorry I scared you. It won't happen again." Cole pulled her inside, out of the cold. The house was warm, the additions completed enough to be functional. He made her coffee, helped her thaw out, and gradually the tension between them eased. They'd had their first real fight, and they'd navigated it. Not perfectly, but honestly. "The ranch?" Evelyn asked eventually. "How bad was it?" "Lost 3 head of cattle. Could have been worse." Cole's expression was grim. "Found them frozen in a ravine. Must have gotten disoriented in the storm and wandered off. It happens." "I'm sorry." "Part of ranching. You accept the losses and move forward." He looked at her seriously. Speaking of which, we need to talk about what happens after we're married, how we'll handle situations like this. They spent the rest of the day talking through logistics, making agreements, establishing boundaries. If Cole needed to stay at the ranch during bad weather, Evelyn would stay in town unless explicitly sent for. If Evelyn needed to make emergency rides to outlying families, she'd let Cole know her route and expected return. They would trust each other's judgment, but they would also communicate, keep each other informed, and respect each other's expertise. It was practical, unromantic, and absolutely necessary. This was what frontier marriage required, not just love, but strategy. Not just passion, but planning. Building something that could weather the literal and metaphorical storms ahead. When Evelyn finally rode back to town late that afternoon, with Cole escorting her despite her protests, she felt oddly strengthened by their fight. They'd confronted a hard truth about what their life together would demand, and they'd faced it honestly. No illusions, no romanticizing, just two people committed to making it work, whatever it took. The wedding was 3 weeks away, and Evelyn Carter had never been more certain that she was marrying exactly the right man. The final 3 weeks before the wedding passed in a blur of preparation and unexpected challenges. The late storm had damaged several buildings in town, and everyone who could swing a hammer was pressed into service for repairs. Evelyn found herself working alongside Martha Webb and the other women, hauling supplies and holding boards while the men worked overhead. Her hands, which had been soft and delicate when she'd arrived from Boston, were now capable and strong, moving with the confidence of someone who knew her own strength. Cole appeared in town most evenings, tired from ranch work, but determined to help with the community repairs. Evelyn would see him across the work site, lifting beams, directing younger men, solving problems with quiet efficiency, and feel a surge of pride. This was the man she was marrying, someone who showed up, who contributed, who made things better by his presence. One evening, as they walked back to the schoolhouse together after a long day of work, Cole suddenly stopped in the middle of the street. "What?" Evelyn asked, alarmed. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." He looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "I just realized. In 2 weeks, you'll be my wife. You'll live at the ranch. This," he gestured at the schoolhouse, "won't be your home anymore." Evelyn felt a pang she hadn't expected. She'd been so focused on the wedding, on the future they'd build together, that she hadn't fully processed leaving this place. The tiny room where she'd spent her first brutal winter, the stove she'd learned to manage, the desk where she'd planned lessons and written in her journal and slowly transformed from a lost Easterner into someone who belonged here. "It's just a building," she said, not quite convincingly. "No, it's not." Cole took her hand. "It's where you proved yourself. Where you became who you are now. That matters." "I'll still teach," Evelyn said. "We agreed on that." "I know, but it'll be different. You'll come here as a visitor instead of living here. That's a loss, even if it's the right choice." The fact that he understood this, that he could name what she was feeling before she'd fully acknowledged it herself, made her love him even more fiercely. "I don't regret it," she said. "Choosing you, choosing the ranch, I don't regret any of it. I know, just wanted you to know that I see what you're giving up, and I'm grateful for it." They stood together in the gathering darkness, and Evelyn realized this was what their marriage would be, seeing each other clearly, acknowledging both gains and losses, choosing each other anyway. It wasn't the fairy tale romance of novels, but it was deeper and more durable. It was real. The week before the wedding brought an unexpected visitor. Evelyn was teaching arithmetic when a well-dressed woman appeared in the schoolhouse doorway, so out of place in Cutter's Junction that several children actually stopped working to stare. "Evelyn Carter?" the woman asked in a cultured Boston accent. Evelyn's stomach dropped. "Aunt Margaret?" Her mother's sister stood in the doorway, impeccably dressed despite the long journey, her sharp eyes taking in everything: the rough schoolhouse, the children in their mended clothes, Evelyn herself in her practical frontier dress, with her work-roughened hands and wind-burned face. "Class dismissed early today," Evelyn managed, her voice steady despite her shock. "We'll resume tomorrow." The children filed out, casting curious glances at the elegant stranger. When they were alone, Margaret stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "Your mother sent me," she said without preamble. She wanted someone from the family at your wedding, even if she couldn't bring herself to come. So here I am. I don't understand. Mother's letter said, your mother says a lot of things, most of them out of fear. Margaret sat delicately on one of the student desks, looking incongruous and slightly ridiculous. She's terrified you've ruined your life, Evelyn, but she's also curious and guilty. She sent me to assess the situation and report back. Assess the situation. Anger flared hot in Evelyn's chest. I'm not a business investment. I'm a grown woman making my own choices. I know that. Your mother is still learning it. Margaret's expression softened. May I speak frankly? Please do. When I first heard about your plans, coming west to teach, marrying a frontier rancher, I thought you were having some sort of breakdown, running away from something. Margaret looked around the schoolhouse again, her gaze lingering on the books, the carefully organized supplies, the children's work displayed on the walls. But this isn't running away, is it? This is running toward something. Yes, Evelyn said simply. Tell me about him. This Cole Maddox. Your mother's letter said he's a rancher with no family connections and limited prospects. What else should I know? Evelyn could have been offended by the bluntness, but there was genuine curiosity in Margaret's voice, not judgment. So she told her aunt the truth about meeting Cole, about his quiet strength, about learning to survive on the frontier, about building something real together. She talked about the ranch, the community, the teaching that mattered more than any position in Boston ever had. Margaret listened without interrupting. When Evelyn finished, she was quiet for a long moment. You love him, she said finally, more than I knew I could love anyone. And he loves you the same way? He does. Margaret nodded slowly. Then you're richer than most people in Boston, with all their money and connections. You found something they spend their whole lives searching for and never find. Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you for understanding. I'm not sure I do understand fully. This life is so foreign to everything I know. Margaret smiled slightly. But I don't need to understand it to see that it suits you. You look happy, Evelyn, genuinely happy. That's more than I can say for most of the women in our social circle. Will you tell Mother that? I will. Whether she'll listen is another matter entirely. Margaret stood, brushing dust from her traveling dress with a grimace. Now, show me this town of yours, and introduce me to your rancher. I want to take his measure for myself. Evelyn brought Margaret to meet Cole that evening at the boarding house where Mrs. Kimball had prepared a special dinner. Cole had cleaned up, dressed in his best clothes, still simple by Boston standards, but neat and respectable. Evelyn could see him evaluating Margaret just as she was evaluating him, both of them careful and measuring. Mr. Maddox, Margaret said, extending her hand. I'm Evelyn's aunt. I've come to attend the wedding. Ma'am. Cole shook her hand, his grip firm but not aggressive. Welcome to Cutter's Junction. Thank you. Tell me, Mr. Maddox, what are your plans for supporting my niece? I understand ranching is an uncertain business. Evelyn winced at the directness, but Cole didn't flinch. It is uncertain, he agreed. Weather, market prices, disease, lots of variables I can't control. But I own my land outright, no debt. I've got healthy livestock and good grazing, and I work hard. He met Margaret's eyes steadily. I can't promise Evelyn luxury, but I can promise she'll never want for necessities, and she'll always be my equal partner in everything we build. Equal partner, Margaret repeated. That's an unusual arrangement. Evelyn's an unusual woman. Seems wrong to treat her as anything less than what she is. Margaret's expression flickered. Surprise, maybe, or reassessment. And if she wants to continue teaching? Then she teaches. We've already discussed it. The ranch work can flex around her schedule. You'd allow your wife to work? I'd support my wife in doing what matters to her, Cole corrected gently. There's a difference. The dinner that followed was surprisingly pleasant. Margaret asked direct questions about the ranch, the town, the life Evelyn would be living. Cole answered honestly, neither minimizing the hardships nor exaggerating the rewards. Evelyn watched them talk and felt something settle in her chest. She didn't need her family's approval, but having it, or at least having them try to understand, meant more than she'd expected. Afterwards, walking Margaret back to her room at the boarding house, her aunt said quietly, "He's nothing like what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone rough, uneducated, looking for a convenient wife to cook and clean." Margaret paused. "Instead, I find a thoughtful man who sees your value and wants to build something with you, not just use you for domestic labor. Your mother will be surprised." "Will she be pleased?" "I don't know, but I am." Margaret touched Evelyn's arm. "You've chosen well, my dear. Better than most women in our circles ever do. Hold on to him." "I intend to." The day before the wedding, Evelyn rode out to the ranch one last time as an unmarried woman. Cole was working on final touches to the house, hanging curtains she'd made, arranging furniture, making everything ready for her arrival. She found him in what would be their bedroom, adjusting a mirror on the wall. "It's beautiful," she said from the doorway. He turned, and the smile that crossed his face was open and unguarded. "You're here. I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow." "I wanted to see it before everything changes." Cole set down his tools and crossed to her. "Having second thoughts?" "Not even for a moment." She looked around the room, the bed he'd built, the dresser he'd refinished, the windows that would let in morning light. "I just wanted a moment to take it all in. This is where we'll start our life together." "Our life together started months ago," Cole said. "This is just making it official." "Is that all marriage is to you? Making something official?" "No." He took her hands, his expression serious. "Marriage is promising in front of everyone who matters that you're committed, that you're not going anywhere, that whatever comes, good or bad, you're facing it together." He paused. "It's making permanent what we've already been building." "I like that," Evelyn said softly. "Making permanent what we've been building." They spent the afternoon walking the ranch, Cole showing her his plans for expansion, for the future. He talked about breeding better livestock, about irrigation systems, about eventually hiring help so he wasn't doing everything alone. Evelyn shared her ideas for teaching, bringing more books west, maybe starting a small library in town, teaching the older students more advanced subjects. As the sun began to set, painting the prairie in shades of gold and amber, they stood on the porch of their home and looked out over the land that would be theirs to steward together. "Are you scared?" Evelyn asked. "About tomorrow?" "Terrified," Cole admitted. "Not about marrying you, that's the one thing I'm certain about, but about everything else. Making you happy. Being the kind of husband you deserve. Not letting you down." "Cole." She turned to face him fully. "You've never let me down. Not once. You saved my life. You taught me to survive here. You supported my teaching. You built us a home. What more could I possibly ask for?" "I don't know. But I want to keep earning you, every day. Keep proving that choosing me was the right decision." "You don't have to earn me," Evelyn said firmly. "I'm not a prize to be won. I'm your partner. You're equal. We earn each other, constantly, by showing up and choosing each other and working toward the life we want." He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "How did I get so lucky finding you?" "You stopped at a way station you didn't have to stop at. You saved someone you didn't know. You were kind when you could have been indifferent." Evelyn smiled. "I'm the lucky one." They stayed there as darkness fell, wrapped in each other's arms, and Evelyn felt a peace so profound it almost frightened her. This was right. This man, this place, this life. All of it was exactly, perfectly right. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, the kind of spring day that promised hope and new beginnings. Evelyn woke in the schoolhouse one last time, her stomach a knot of nerves and anticipation. Martha and Sarah arrived early to help her dress, bringing the wedding gown they'd altered from Martha's own marriage dress. Simple white cotton with careful embroidery, practical but beautiful. "You look lovely," Sarah said, adjusting the fit across Evelyn's shoulders. "Cole's not going to know what hit him. He's seen me covered in dust and exhausted from teaching. I don't think a dress will surprise him much." "Trust me," Martha said with a knowing smile. "It'll surprise him." They gathered at the church at noon. The entire town had turned out, cramming into the small building with more people standing outside. Evelyn stood at the back with her Aunt Margaret, waiting for the signal to walk down the aisle, and felt her heart hammering so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. "Ready?" Margaret asked. "More than ready." The doors opened and Evelyn stepped forward. The church quieted, every face turning toward her. And there, at the front, stood Cole. He wore a dark suit she'd never seen before, his hair neatly combed, his face clean-shaven. But what struck her most was his expression, pure, undisguised wonder. He was looking at her like she was the most precious thing he'd ever seen, and Evelyn felt tears threaten even as she smiled. She walked down the aisle, each step bringing her closer to her future. When she reached Cole, he extended his hand, and she took it without hesitation. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. The circuit preacher spoke about partnership and commitment and building a life together. When it came time for vows, Cole spoke in a voice that carried through the church despite its quietness. "I promise to stand beside you, not in front of you or behind you. I promise to support your dreams and share your burdens. I promise to trust you with my heart and my future. I promise to love you, Evelyn, for all the days I have left." Evelyn's voice was steadier than she expected when she replied, "I promise to be your equal partner in everything we build. I promise to face whatever comes with courage and honesty. I promise to choose you every day for the rest of my life. I promise to love you, Cole, with everything I am." When the preacher pronounced them married and told Cole he could kiss his bride, the kiss was gentle and sweet and full of promise. The church erupted in applause, and Evelyn laughed against Cole's lips, feeling joy bubble up irrepressible and bright. The reception at the boarding house was lively and warm. Someone had brought a fiddle, and there was dancing, clumsy but enthusiastic. Evelyn danced with Cole, with Tom Henderson, with Dutch the blacksmith, with children who wanted to spin until they were dizzy. She ate cake and accepted congratulations and felt surrounded by love from this community that had become her family. Margaret pulled her aside during a quiet moment. "I leave tomorrow morning, back to Boston. But before I go, I wanted to tell you, I'm proud of you, Evelyn. You had the courage to leave everything familiar and build something true. That's rare. Thank you, Aunt Margaret, for coming, for understanding or trying to. I'll tell your mother you're happy, really, genuinely happy. Beyond that, I can't make any promises about what she'll do with the information." Margaret smiled. "But I think eventually she'll come around. She loves you, even if she has a strange way of showing it." After the reception, as the sun began to set, Cole and Evelyn rode out to the ranch together. They traveled slowly, savoring the last light, neither in a hurry now that they had all the time in the world. "How does it feel?" Cole asked. "Being married?" "Exactly the same as yesterday," Evelyn said honestly, "and completely different, both at once." "I know what you mean." They reached the ranch as darkness fell. Cole helped Evelyn down from her horse, and together they walked into the house. Their house now, truly. Inside, a fire burned in the hearth, and everything was ready for them. "Welcome home, Mrs. Maddox," Cole said, pulling her close. "Welcome home, Mr. Maddox," Evelyn replied. That night, in the bedroom Cole had prepared so carefully, they came together as husband and wife, tentative at first, then with growing confidence, discovering each other with tenderness and passion. Evelyn had been nervous about this part, but Cole was patient and gentle, taking his time, making sure she felt safe and cherished. And when they finally joined, it felt not like losing something, but like finding it, a completion, a rightness, a physical expression of everything they'd been building emotionally. Afterwards, lying tangled together in the darkness, Cole's hand tracing idle patterns on her shoulder, Evelyn felt a contentment so complete it defied description. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too." He kissed her temple. "Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for being worth choosing." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and Evelyn's last thought before sleep claimed her was that she'd never felt safer, more loved, or more at home in her entire life. The weeks that followed their wedding established a new rhythm. Evelyn continued teaching 3 days a week, riding into town in the morning and returning to the ranch in the evening. The other days she worked alongside Cole, learning about the livestock, helping with repairs, managing the household tasks that kept the ranch running. It was exhausting and fulfilling in equal measure. They learned each other in 1,000 small ways. Cole's habit of waking before dawn, moving quietly so he wouldn't disturb her. Evelyn's tendency to get lost in books and lose track of time. The way they could work side by side for hours in comfortable silence. The way their conversations deepened in the evenings, sharing thoughts and fears and dreams they'd never spoken aloud to anyone else. There were adjustments, frustrations, moments when the reality of sharing a life with another person chafed against old habits of independence. But they talked through it, compromised, found solutions together. This was the work of marriage, Evelyn realized. Not the wedding day romance, but the daily practice of choosing each other, adapting, building something that fit them both. 2 months after the wedding, Evelyn realized she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few weeks, but hadn't been certain. When she finally told Cole, she found him in the barn repairing tack. "I have news," she said, her heart racing. He looked up, reading something in her expression. "Good news or bad news?" "Good news, I think. I hope." She took a breath. "I'm going to have a baby." Cole froze, the leather strap falling from his hands. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then a smile spread across his face, slow, wondering, transformative. "A baby," he repeated. "We're having a baby?" "In about 7 months, if I'm calculating right." He crossed to her in 2 strides, pulling her into his arms with a gentleness that made her throat tight. "Evelyn, I don't even have words." "You're happy?" she asked, needing to hear it. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it." He pulled back enough to see her face. "Are you happy about this?" "Yes. Scared, but happy." She placed her hand over her still flat stomach. "We're going to be parents, Cole." "Best news I've ever had," he said, and kissed her with a tenderness that made everything else fall away. They told the town the following week, and the response was immediate and overwhelming. Martha organized another quilting circle, this time to make baby clothes. Sarah Morrison offered advice and reassurance. Even the school children were excited, treating Evelyn with a new carefulness that was both touching and slightly amusing. Evelyn continued teaching through the summer, though as her pregnancy progressed, she reduced her schedule. The school committee hired a young woman from Millerville to assist and eventually take over when the baby came. It was hard, stepping back from work that had defined her for so long. But Evelyn found she didn't resent it the way she'd feared. This was a different kind of purpose, just as valuable. Cole became impossibly protective, worrying about her riding, about her working too hard, about everything that could possibly go wrong. Evelyn had to remind him repeatedly that pregnancy was natural, not an illness, and that she was perfectly capable of assessing her own limits. "I know," he said one evening as she tried to convince him she could still help with ranch work. "I just can't help worrying. You and this baby, you're everything to me. If something happened, nothing's going to happen," Evelyn said firmly. "I'm healthy, the pregnancy is progressing normally, and I have a whole community of women who've been through this before. I'm not doing this alone." "I know you're not, but I'm going to worry anyway. Then worry quietly, and let me live my life," she said, but with enough warmth to soften the words. Summer gave way to fall, the prairie turning gold, the harvest coming in. Evelyn's belly swelled, making movement more awkward, but she adapted. She taught sitting down, rode less often, accepted help when offered. The baby moved inside her, little flutters at first, then stronger kicks that made her laugh when they came at unexpected moments. Cole would place his hand on her belly in the evenings, feeling their child move, his expression full of wonder. "Can't believe there's a whole person in there, Sa," he'd say. "Our person." "Half you, half me," Evelyn would reply. "Wonder what they'll be like." "Strong," Cole said. "Smart. Stubborn, as both of us combined. Heaven help us." They prepared the house for the baby's arrival. Setting up a cradle Cole built himself, organizing supplies, making plans. Martha coordinated with Sarah and the other women to ensure someone would be available when Evelyn went into labor. The community rallied around them, as it had rallied around Evelyn from the beginning. In late November, on a cold morning when frost painted the windows in crystal patterns, Evelyn's labor began. Cole rode for Martha and Sarah while Evelyn breathed through the contractions, trying to remember everything she'd learned from helping Sarah. The pain was intense, overwhelming, but she'd faced the frontier's challenges before. She could face this too. The labor lasted 8 hours, shorter than many first births, Martha assured her, though it felt eternal to Evelyn. Cole stayed nearby, holding her hand when she needed it, stepping back when the women told him to, his face pale but determined. When their daughter finally arrived, squalling and perfect, Evelyn wept with relief and joy and exhaustion. Cole took the baby in his big, careful hands, his eyes shining with tears he didn't bother to hide. "She's perfect," he whispered. "Evelyn, she's absolutely perfect." They named her Grace, for the grace that had brought them together, the grace that had sustained them through hardship, the grace of building a life they both loved. Grace Maddox, born on the frontier, daughter of a rancher and a teacher, heir to everything they were building together. Winter settled in fully, but the cold felt different this year. Not threatening, but cozy. The house was warm and full of life. Grace demanded constant attention, and Evelyn learned the exhausting, rewarding rhythm of new motherhood. Cole helped more than most frontier fathers would, changing diapers and walking the floor with a crying baby, insisting that Grace was his responsibility too. On Christmas Eve, with snow falling softly outside and their daughter asleep in her cradle, Evelyn and Cole sat by the fire, wrapped in blankets, and reflected on the year that had passed. "Remember when we met?" Evelyn asked, "when you found me at that way station?" "I thought you were going to freeze to death before morning," Cole said. Stubborn woman, trying to wait it out alone. "I didn't know any better. I'd never seen winter like that. And now look at you." He gestured around, at the house they'd built, the sleeping baby, the life they'd created. "You're more frontier than half the people born here." "I had a good teacher." She leaned against him. "Cole, do you ever think about how different things would be if you hadn't stopped that night? If you'd just ridden past?" "Every day," he admitted. "And I thank whatever luck or fate or chance brought me past that station at exactly the right moment. Because finding you, marrying you, it's the best thing that ever happened to me." "Same," Evelyn whispered. "All of it. The good and the hard and the scary parts. I wouldn't change any of it." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the fire crackle and Grace's soft breathing. Outside, the frontier winter raged on, harsh, unforgiving, demanding. But inside, there was warmth and love, and the solid foundation of a partnership built on trust and respect and unwavering commitment. Evelyn thought about the woman she'd been when she first arrived in Cutter's Junction, lost, afraid, clinging to a dream that had seemed more like a desperate gamble. That woman had been broken down by the frontier, reshaped, forged into someone stronger and more authentic. And in the process, she'd found love with a man who saw her for who she truly was and valued her anyway. This was what she'd been searching for all along, though she hadn't known it when she left Boston. Not comfort or security or social approval, but purpose, partnership. A life that challenged her and fulfilled her and demanded everything she had to give. The frontier had tested her, had taken her soft hands and comfortable assumptions and refined them into something durable, had shown her what she was capable of when pushed to her limits, and had given her Cole, steady, strong, silent Cole, who showed his love through action rather than words, who'd saved her life and then stepped back to let her save herself. Together they'd built something that would last, not because it was easy, but because they were both willing to do the hard work, to communicate honestly, to trust each other, to show up day after day and choose this life, this partnership, this future. Grace stirred in her cradle, making the small sounds that meant she'd wake soon. Evelyn started to rise, but Cole placed a hand on her arm. "I'll get her," he said. "You rest." She watched him lift their daughter, marveling at the gentleness in his big hands, the soft voice he used to soothe her. This man who could break a wild horse or build a house from nothing was infinitely tender with this tiny person they'd created together. "Cole," Evelyn said softly. He looked back at her, Grace cradled against his shoulder. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for saving me, for loving me, for building this life with me." "Thank you," he replied, "for choosing to stay, for taking a chance on a taciturn rancher who doesn't know pretty words, for making me happier than I ever thought I'd be." They smiled at each other across the room, And in that moment, Evelyn felt the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not in spite of the hardships, but because of them. The frontier had demanded everything from her, and in return, it had given her everything that mattered. Spring would come eventually, bringing new challenges, new opportunities, new tests of strength and will. There would be droughts and harsh winters, sick livestock and failed crops, all the uncertainties that came with ranching life. Evelyn's teaching would continue to evolve, adapting to motherhood, finding new ways to serve the community. They would face it all together, making decisions as partners, supporting each other through whatever came. But tonight, in the warm house they'd built together, with their daughter sleeping peacefully and the man she loved by her side, Evelyn Carter Maddox was simply, profoundly grateful for the journey that had brought her here, for the courage to leave comfort behind, for the strength to endure when enduring seemed impossible, and most of all, for finding love in the last place she'd expected it, on the harsh, beautiful frontier with a man who'd shown her what it meant to truly come home. The snow continued falling outside, covering the prairie in pristine white, and inside, a new family settled into the rhythms of a life built on hard work, honest communication, and love forged in the fires of frontier survival. It wasn't the life Evelyn had imagined for herself back in Boston. It was infinitely better. It was real. It was theirs. And it was only just beginning.